All right, welcome everyone. This is Chris with the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. And today I have two guests. I have Jason and Mike from the International Sous Vide Association. Hey guys, how are you doing?
Doing really good.
Yeah, doing awesome. Thanks for having us, Chris.
Oh, thanks for coming on. Yeah, so I guess I met Jason probably about 3-4 years ago, maybe at Star Chefs for their Chefs Congress, which Jason and I ended up in almost every single workshop together. I think every year, like we didn't plan it that way. We
Yep.
just somehow ended up in the same ones. And interestingly, I think I told him maybe last year, my old sous chef actually had bought one of his cookbooks. Like I didn't know anything about you, but he had just got into sous vide and was looking for some books and found one of your books on Amazon and bought it. And, then like 5 years later, I ended up meeting you in person, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was definitely fun that we kept ending up in not only the same workshops, but like the same tables half the time. Like, hey, I remember you, and that was fun.
Yeah, definitely. So that's how this started. And then last year was the first year of the conference, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I got to go to that up in Delaware, and that was a really good time. So why don't we kind of start at the beginning? How did this whole sous vide association start? Who started it? Did you guys know each other? Like, what's your relationship to each other?
So apparently Jason meets all the best people in his life because they bought his books first, because that's what happened here. I got into sous vide cooking in 2014. My mother-in-law bought me a Sancerre, which to my wife's chagrin, I still tell her is the best physical gift outside of, children that anybody's ever given me. But I, of course, got one of Jason's books, just random off Amazon, and think I've bought about 15 of that book for like friends and family now because it helped me so much. Got into his Facebook group, and then I'm an event planner. That's my background, doing conferences and seminars. And after being a part of his group, I just have this thing about building connections with people and wanting. I started, realizing like I think at the time there were like 27,000 people or something in the group, and I'm like, wouldn't it be fun if we could all get together and cook? Like this would just be great to explore this. And I was kind of in between things at the time. So I reached out to Jason randomly on Facebook and was like, hey, I have this idea. Have you ever seen this? Has anybody done this? I haven't seen a sous vide conference. I haven't seen a sous vide association. Is this a thing? And then, it just turned into magic. I'll let you tell the next part of that.
Yeah, I was just like, is this guy like scamming me or something? Like, is this just one of those random emails you get, out of the blue? And as we kept getting further and further in the plans, and it's really started coming together. We got some really big names to come on board. The first time, Crea and Cuisine Solutions was our title sponsor. Dave Pietranczyk from Polyscience, met him at Star Chefs as well. He's always there. So we got some big support, and the whole conference just kind of came together, and I was like, apparently this is a real thing that is now actually happening. And had it last year, the first one, and it was an amazing time with lots of good food, lots of good speakers, and a lot of good fun.
Well, Jason, how did you get into sous vide, and how long have you been doing that?
So about 10 years ago now, for Christmas, I got a copy of Thomas Keller's Under Pressure Cookbook and the old sous vide crock pot temperature controller that you'd plug the crock pot in and it basically turn it on or off to maintain temperature. And I read through Under Pressure from cover to cover, and I was like, I still have no idea what he's really saying here. And part of that's because, he was still learning, I think, sous vide a lot, especially the underlying principles of it himself, but it's also Thomas Keller. His recipe for roasting a chicken is like 8 pages. It's 3-star Michelin quality things he's explaining to you. And I'm a home cook and just an adventurous home cook. So I didn't really understand what he was getting at a lot of it. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do the research and figure out how do you actually use sous vide and what is it all about? And at the time, there was no information really. It was all on eGullet with Nathan Miragold and Douglas Baldwin before they were household names for a lot of people, before Modernist Cuisine, box set came out, and they were just on eGullet posting in the forums. And as I dove into it, I realized that for the most part, there was a lot of science, like sciencey people doing science to figure out what was happening and then communicating to other sciencey people. And that's completely fine. And that's a good way to learn about something when they're discovering a technique, but that's not what a lot of cooks need. When you roast a chicken, you don't need to understand the temperature diffusion and thermal depth curves, even though they happen in roasting a chicken just like they do a sous vide. You just need to know what temperature you want the meat to be, and that cooking it at 500 will give you a different result than cooking at 350, and kind of understanding a little bit of that. But you don't need to know the hard science behind it. So once I stripped away all the hard kind of science behind the sous vide, I was left with some principles that are very easy to understand and make sous vide super easy and super convenient. So I started sharing those on my blog, and that turned into cookbooks, and just the rest is history. 10 years later, Facebook group with 40,000 people and sold tens of thousands of books, and still just an adventurous home cook, but I, get to share my love for sous vide with a lot of people now.
I don't know how you get a Facebook group that big. That seems crazy. I don't think I'm in any Facebook groups that big except, like one or two. How do you control that? How many moderators do you have? Do you have multiple moderators? I'm assuming at that number, like people just pretty much self-police and answer questions. Like one person comes on, asks a question, and everyone else does the work.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is. We really don't have moderators. Like I will ban people if they act out. My mom is another moderator on there, but that's about it. Mike does, alerts me whenever people are misbehaving, but it's really if someone crosses the line, and our line's pretty much like you don't treat people like garbage, then if you cross that line, you're out of the group and blocked. There's no engagement from me. There's no kind of dealing with these people. It's just you're banned from the group, and people know that, so they generally behave the majority of the time.
Yeah, it's hard as, I have the Chefs Without Restaurants Facebook group, and we're approaching like 1,000 people, and that gets to be a lot. Because I have no one else moderating, doing anything, and people post things, and you just kind of hope that like members within the group can answer each other's questions, and it's a little hands off for me, and I don't have to do that because there's a lot going on elsewhere. But I'm just always impressed at these huge groups, and that's still a incredibly large number for me to wrap my head around. When did the group start?
It started about 3 or 4 years ago. And honestly, I've just been really lucky that the people in the group are a great community. And there's a lot of people that are very visible within the group that help kind of steer it and answer a lot of questions. And it's really less about me, the group, and it's more about all the great community members that we have there.
Well, that's what I was hoping with my chef's group, is that like you can kind of crowdsource all this stuff, right? Like if you have a lot of great members and great engagement, that it's a community that can kind of help each other out, uplift each other, and you just need a very little amount of kind of direction for it.
Yep. I think it's all about kind of setting the tone that you want the group to have. And in my case, that was helpful and friendly. And then as long as you enforce that, the people that like that tone will be more involved, and they'll continue to propagate that tone.
So do you have any idea what the makeup of your general crowd is, whether it be people in the group or people who come to the convention, like home cooks, serious enthusiasts versus like professional chefs?
I think it's about 60 to 70% home cooks, and I think about the same for the conference. Is that right, Mike?
Yeah, it's right around, I think, 60% home cooks, 40% professionals for the conference.
And that's something we've been, as I was just gonna say, that's something we've been looking to, expand on, especially going into this year's conference. Was, Mike and I are both home cooks, so we didn't want to come out and say like, we're going to teach you how to use sous vide in your restaurant, because we don't know that. We focus on what we know. But now we do have a lot of great partners like Crea and Polyscience and Backmaster and Vesta, a lot of these brands that do work with people in professional kitchens. So we're looking at expanding that to really provide some of these services to chefs that either want to, that are chefs that want to learn how to use it in their own kitchen, or that are cooks that are trying to move their way up through other people's kitchens and, just add one more tool to their toolbox.
Yeah, I mean, I was really impressed with the makeup of home cooks that were there who seem super knowledgeable. I mean, I think sometimes you hear like home cook, and there's this idea of like who a home cook is. There's home cooks killing it in all levels of food. I mean, one of my guests on the podcast is my buddy Anthony, who does pasta at home, and he's making pasta better than almost any restaurant I've ever been to, and he doesn't work in the food field at all, but he's like gone all in. And I saw that just with a lot of the interactions with the people at the conference and the questions they were asking.
It's interesting. I was talking with one of our commercial company sponsors recently, and we were talking about this, and home cooks have, I think, a little bit more of a license to be creative almost. Like they are more, they have more flexibility to push themselves to try new techniques because they're not preparing it for service every night for 300 people, you know? And I think that's something that I've seen in the groups. I mean, it's interesting what direction that goes, because the other thing is, I mean, you see some people doing some really cool things outside of meat, but then there's a whole portion that's like, oh, sous vide is for steak and, you know, chicken, and that's it. But in general, I think there's on the home cook side, what they have going for them is there's just this opportunity to just try things, and if you fail, hey, you know, tick off your wife, and she's like, oh, I still love you, but you know, it wasn't the best one you've ever done. At least that's what mine says most of the time.
Do you think it kind of is because it idiot proofs things to some extent? Like, you know, roasting a chicken or cooking a steak is very, you know, you got to watch it and get it out at the right time, where sous vide is kind of like set it, forget it, because you're not going to go over that number. Do you think that that weighs into it a little bit, that it can kind of help you if you're not a professional cook and aren't really in tune with that kind of stuff?
Definitely. I mean, for me, and Jason probably has a lot more on this, but for me personally, when I got into it, it opened up the opportunities for me to try things like an eggs benedict and make a hollandaise sauce, because now I'm not worried about my eggs, you know, overcooking because they're going to cook for 45 minutes or whatever. I can focus, and Jason's probably seen from where I started posting to kind of what I post now. I'm a lot more, I've always loved cooking, but I'm a lot more willing to take risks and try new techniques, half of which I learned from him. Because it takes sort of the, you know, hey, I'm going to screw this up if I don't watch it super closely out of it.
Yeah, in my opinion, there's like, sous vide has two purposes. One is to turn out these types of dishes that you can really only do with sous vide, like a 72-hour short rib, or some of these things that are, you can use traditional methods to do it, but you're really just using traditional methods to, you know, emulate sous vide, these long, slow cooks. And the other purpose of sous vide is to just make things super convenient. And that's where a lot of home cooks, like you're saying, really benefit from it. That cooking a chicken breast is, yeah, I can do that almost perfectly every time that I want to do it, but I have to be at the stove and be paying attention and not be answering my email or, you know, on Slack or, you know, all these other distractions going on. And so knowing with sous vide, those can be perfectly cooked at the end, it just removes any concern for me. And I think a lot of home cooks have found that, and that kind of gives them the license to, you know, now I'm going to do a sauce because I know the protein is going to be cooked perfectly. So they can kind of explore in a few different directions that they might be worried about the protein if they were just going to grill it or pan fry it.
My favorite thing to do is ice cream, because I love making ice cream. And that's one of those things, like, from it's not thick to scrambled eggs is like a 15-second window, right? Like if you're ever making a custard ice cream over a Bain Marie, it goes so quickly, much like a hollandaise. So that's one of those things I love doing my ice cream base. I mean, there's obviously so many great uses for sous vide, but for me, that's one of my very favorites, is just put the mix in there, throw it in, and let it go.
Yeah, I think the convenience is a huge factor. And I think especially, I think it's becoming more accepted now just as a general technique. But I think initially a lot of chefs were like, this isn't real cooking, or, you know, I can already do this using another method. And some of the real strong sous vide supporters would be like, well, it's better if you do this, or it's like, and you get an argument. For me, there's always just, it's another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah.
And sometimes you might want to just make it the traditional way because of the sights and the sounds and the smells, because you're really enjoying it in that moment. And sometimes you might just want to put together a really quick ice cream base and not worry about it. And when that's the case, use sous vide, and you know, it's just one more tool out of all the tools we have as chefs. And I don't think it's better or worse than any other, you know, technique that you can use.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I also think as a home cook, I think it brings, you know, as a chef, like you're used to cooking for massive groups of people, you know, all the time. And I love entertaining. That's one of the things that's been hardest for me about quarantine with all of this going on, is I can't have, my friends over and cook for people. My wife's a resident at Johns Hopkins, and every summer, which this is probably the first year we're not going to do it, we've done a welcome barbecue or a welcome, thing at our house for 20 to 40 new residents, and we invite everybody. And it makes it so nice to be able to like batch cook everything, have it prepped in advance, using sous vide and pasteurized. And it makes it like I can actually go hang out with my wife and hang out with the guests. And there's just a lot to the community building aspect of it that I think has resonated really strongly with me.
Yeah, I'm always wondering why people love crock pot cooking. Like, to me, crock pot cooking is like the same idea, but in like a less controlled environment and a lot more unsafe. Like, I always think about my in-laws. I went to their house one time for a party, and they'd just taken this bag of like meatballs out of the freezer from Costco and just jammed them all in this crock pot. And it probably sat in the temperature danger zone for hours. When you think of like something that was like 0 degrees, and like 4 hours later, it's probably like 72 degrees. It's like, oh, I wish more people would do sous vide, because I feel like you'd get a much better result. Because that's what you're doing, right? Like, all these people want to do it, like set it, forget it, slow and low, and then make entertaining easy. And I'd rather see people get a sous vide setup than using that crock pot for that.
Well, it's great because you don't come out with, 180-degree shredded chicken at the end of it. I mean, crock pot, I used to use it a lot before I got into sous vide because it was convenient, but I'm with you right there. Like, why would I even go that route when the end result is always going to be a well done braised meat? I can, do the same thing and get something that is a little more palatable for sure.
I mean, obviously cost is a barrier to entry, and something I'm sure people are looking at, a $30 crock pot as opposed to like a multi-$100 piece of equipment, and then getting into the whole, what are we doing about vacuum sealing and all that. So it is an investment. And, what are you guys seeing on pricing with that? Is it coming down? I mean, I know some of the things I've been looking at have come down over time, but where are we at with like price ranges on those?
Yeah, prices have dropped a whole lot. It's there's two real classes of circulators to do sous vide. One is the professional ones, and the others for home units. And if a chef out there is interested in exploring sous vide, like, get yourself a home unit, do some things in your off time and experiment with it. So you can get, even sticking with the good brands like Anova and Jewel, you can get something now for under $100. So you can, it's not that much of an investment. It's the cost of, not even a good knife really. And you can explore this cooking method. And then when you're ready to bring it into a professional kitchen, you can look at some of the more commercial circulators, and those are 600 to 1,000. So it is more, but it's, I still use a Polyscience unit that I got 10 years ago, and they're built to run for years with literally not ever being turned off. So you kind of get that heavy duty industrial quality that you need for a working restaurant kitchen.
Is that what the heavy duty upgrade does really, is like motor life and things like that? I mean, do the home units have a limitation on how much water they can heat, or something like volume size? Is that?
Yeah, the main things that the commercial ones give you is, heating power that you can do a lot larger amounts. So you might do a bath to cook, 100 steaks, where most home cooks don't need that. And then just the durability. A lot of the home units are good for people that are, using them a few times a week, and they'll last for a few years, like most things you use at home. But if you're, using them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in a professional kitchen where they're getting bumped and spilled on and, abused, then the commercial upgrade is really kind of what you need, because otherwise the other ones will break sooner rather than later. And then some of the ones have probes and more, some of the better functionality that some chefs do need in their kitchens. So that's one of the other things that most home units don't have.
Yeah, I always recommend, if you can afford to buy something and you think you're going to love it, go with the upgrade at the front end, because it always sucks when you spend like $100-$200 on that home model, and then like in a year you really love it, and then you're dropping like another $600-$800. It's like, you should just put that money towards that. But we've all been there. I've done that with like the recording stuff for my podcast. You buy a cheap microphone for $30, and then you're buying the $100 microphone in 2 months when you realize the audio quality was terrible, right?
Yep.
So let's talk about the conference a little bit. So you had a big conference scheduled to be a normal conference in person in San Francisco this summer. COVID happens, so that's not happening. But you're going to take your conference virtual. So what's that look like for you guys? What's changed, and how do you think that's going to go?
So the one of the awesome things is all of our speakers pretty much have confirmed that they're still going to present virtually. So in terms of the content, not much is changing in terms of what we're presenting. The format will change slightly. Certainly, one of the great things last year was we had some awesome meat sponsors that donated, for the receptions, and Cuisine Solutions put on one of them, and so the food was incredible. So a lot of our thought process is, okay, how do we still capture that, capture the food portion, and how do we make it engaging? Because certainly a lot of why I wanted to even do this in the first place was to network with people, to get to know people, to make new friends in the industry, or other home cooks that we can kind of share with. So talking about doing a lot of certainly some hands-on demos. One example we talked about for both of the lunches, having a couple different or a few different rooms each day where we would give the recipes in advance, tell people, hey, if you want to cook this chicken dish, have a chicken breast cooked 140 for 3 hours and ready, and then here's all the other ingredients. And Jason's going to be cooking this dish and he'll demonstrate it live. You can cook along. So some cook along stuff like that I think will be really fun. Still doing virtual cocktail hours to demonstrate some cocktails, but also just hang out. That was another really fun thing I think for us to see last year was the bar every night was packed with attendees and speakers together, like just hanging out and networking. I'm sure you caught a little bit of that when you were there. And so a lot of our speakers are still very engaged in being a part of those networking opportunities and getting connected with the attendees who are coming. So that's looking at things a little bit different, but really trying to hit on the same goals and the same things that made last year so special.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to see this for a little while, but I don't think a online conference can ever replace the feel of being in person. But like we had said before this started, this year I was not going to be able to make the trip to San Francisco. This is so much more convenient for me. So it'll be interesting to see the swing in attendees and people who maybe couldn't spend the money to hop on a plane and fly out to one of the most expensive cities in the country and put up the lodging and pay for that they will come online. So I'll be interested in following up with you guys afterwards to see how that went.
There's
how your attendees liked it. And
for sure, there's definitely some opportunities like that I think for growing the audience, that's great that we can put this in the hands of more people. We had talked about live streaming last year, but being the first year, we didn't want too many moving parts. So really, this is kind of a kickstart for us to test out the technology, and hopefully going forward, we'll be able to still offer a live stream package as well for the people that can't make it out for various reasons. So all in all, I'm excited about the possibilities that this offers us, and I think it's just going to be an awesome weekend. I'm really looking forward to it.
When you are you going to make them available after the fact, kind of like on demand and being able to download or stream whenever?
Yeah.
So,
anyone that comes to the conference virtually will have access for all the recordings for, I think it was 72 hours or a week, something like that.
Yep.
Mike's in charge of the details. I'm just the pretty face that.
Oh gosh,
so they'll have access to it for a long time that they can go through it at their own leisure, and then we will make them available for purchase to the general public at some point in the future once we kind of clean them up and package them together.
Yeah. So we have a new online community called Champions of Sous Vide, named after our cookbook. That's kind of sort of our new little moniker that we started. And there's a free membership level, and then there's sort of a VIP level that gives you a little more access. And the recordings will be available automatically for the VIPs, but then available for purchase outside of that as well. And really trying to just continue to build that community aspect of cooking and be able to share recipes in one place. In a way, Facebook's kind of hard to catalog some of that stuff, and there's just a lot of things that we're trying to bring into this new community, to sort of pull together everything that we're working on into one place.
So who are some of your speakers for this event?
So our two keynotes, we're super excited. James Briscione, who was planning to be there last year, and then, oh, so horribly sad for him and for us that his flights got canceled. But he just, he's of course Food Network personality, and he opened a new restaurant in Pensacola that I've been to. It is fantastic, called the Angelina's. Rich Rosendale, certified master chef, is going to be our other keynote. Super excited to have him. Meathead will be back doing a session. Gerard and AJ from Crea and Cuisine Solutions. We have a new title sponsor for the virtual. It's Prep Rate by Everidge. And so Michael Kelly will be there. He does a lot of teaching in the industry. Of course, Dave Pietranczyk. Philip Preston is also going to come and do a talk. And Ali Romero. Yep, there you go. Super excited. So, we have a lot of returning people, but then we also have a lot of new folks like Ali, who we were just introduced to, and we're really excited to be able to bring them together as well.
And I find that most of those people I know, and they're already really engaging online, which is what I love. I mean, they're the kind of people who I followed on Twitter. I mean, I think James I first met probably close to like 10 years ago on Twitter, one of those guys who you could just ask questions and have really great conversations with. So it seems like you've gotten the people who really want to be part of that community. I'm sure there will be a lot of follow-up after the conference with them online.
Yeah, we're doing some live Q&As leading up to the event, which should be fun. I did one with Dave Pietranczyk last week, I think, and then we're doing one or two a week leading up to the event to kind of get them some time in front of our community and let our community, pick their brains some. And that was one of my big takeaways from the event last year, was just how nice a lot of these people are. That, Dave Pietranczyk works for the largest sous vide manufacturer. Gerard and AJ, consult at 3-star Michelin restaurants and know more about sous vide than probably anyone on earth. And they're all like down to earth, really nice people that are just happy to, just shoot the breeze with you and hang out and have a good time. And it was really refreshing to meet these really talented people that are just so nice.
I've gotten to know Rich Rosendale really well. So I have the benefit, his place is like half an hour from where I live.
Yep.
And the best barbecue around. You can fake a lot of barbecue shoulder and stuff like that, but brisket is one of those things. And his brisket is unlike any that I can get around here. But, it always surprises me. This guy is a certified master chef. I mean, he's got, all these accolades, Bocuse d'Or and all that. Yeah. And he's in his place. Maybe it's just when I go, but like literally every time I go in, you can just stop in on a Tuesday at 3 and Rich is there. And it's like, I don't even think people in this area know who he is and understand how big a deal that is, that you just like stop in this like roadside barbecue place. And this, the guy who led the culinary team and is a master chef is like in there, and I can just roll in and have a conversation with him. So
it blows my mind. I went down to meet him, and I learned don't ever go meet him on a Monday because his restaurant is closed on Mondays.
Sadly, I've driven out there forgetting that as well.
I learned that lesson, but he's just and with a lot of these people, and like you're saying, I mean, he's so accomplished, and he's done so much, and he's a name that so many people know. He's the most down to earth guy ever. You can just sit and have a conversation, super friendly. Just really have enjoyed getting to know him, and we're really lucky. I think that was sort of the turning point for me, and I think Jason would probably agree with this too. When we first started this thing, our initial focus was like, hey, let's go connect with people in the industry, most of whom Jason knew because I'm an event planner, and let's pitch this idea, and let's just bring some people together onto a committee to sort of help form this, because this is not about me and Jason. This is about the sous vide community, and getting people like James and Dave, who, I mean, gosh, Dave's traveling all the time. Maybe not right now, but he's at the biggest food shows ever. He's in Milan, Italy, and all this. And he's like, I have no time, but I'm going to make time for this because I think this is important. Seeing the people step up to that said, hey, yeah, I want to be a part of this, was really the first moment I was like, this is something that's going to be good. This is something that the community needs, that people are going to be behind. And I just feel really, really lucky to have been sort of at the onset of it, and I'm so excited to see kind of where it goes over the next few years.
Yeah, I've got to get Dave on the show. He and I have been going back and forth about schedule, and it's like, you're sitting at home now, Dave. What are you going to do? And then Rich, the same thing, because he's got this build out of this new place he's been working on.
Yeah.
But hopefully those are two guys. Maybe I can get them on the show before your conference and get a little extra plug in there. But
Be
they've
awesome.
Give them a little poke in the ribs.
Yeah.
a little
Exactly.
poke. But yeah, I mean, the same with Dave. I mean, Dave and I have had a couple phone conversations. I mean, I think one was like an hour and a half one day, and
Yeah.
you know, more than willing to share his knowledge on things. So
Yep.
yeah, great guess. I love the idea of community building. It's the same with, you know, my Chefs Without Restaurants. I literally thought when I started it, it was going to be like 4 people I knew, and we're going to have like this little group of independent chefs. And now looking back at a community where we have literally thousands of people across all platforms with different level of engagement, and then a podcast where people are asking me to come on the show. And I feel like, you know, I'm punching above my weight class. Like, wow, this, you know, really well-known person wants to come on my show. It's kind of cool that I get to now sit down and interview people who I admire. Because again, I thought it was just going to be like my friends in Frederick who have a catering company who I'd have on the show. And especially now with the Zoom, it's so much easier to be able to then just reach out to people anywhere in the world and have them sit down for this.
I can relate to that. When I first reached out to Jason, I'm like, okay, this dude's a celebrity. He's like a Sous Vide celebrity. Yes, you are. He doesn't say it, but he certainly felt like one until I got to know him more. But you know, it's amazing to see. Food is just a great unifier. Like, if there's one thing our world needs right now, it's this. It's getting together, eating good meals, stuffing our mouths so we can't talk to each other, and just, you know, coming together and being together, you know. And I think there's a lot of good movements that are kind of putting that together. But the more of these little niche communities that we can bring together and support each other, I mean, that's what's going to make a difference in everything that's going on right now.
Mm-hmm. And I do think having, like you said, a niche community where, you know, I think sometimes you see these things and they're way too broad, but you guys narrowed in on Sous Vide, something super specific. And it sounds like you have a lot of people in your community.
It's amazing how many people can be in a, you know, quote unquote small niche community. That there's a lot of passionate people out there about a lot of obscure things, and you can build a really good following just with the focusing on something that you really enjoy doing.
So are you two the only ones kind of doing all the legwork on all of this, or do you have a team?
So last year it was mostly just the two of us, with a lot of, I would say, as far as like doing the work, building the conference. Certainly, like, Dave was instrumental last year, and of course has been helpful this year with a lot of things. But he made the connections with Crea, you know, so many, and several of our other sponsors. That's how we got introduced to Rich and several of these other people. This year, we're really lucky to have had a few people who really had a great time at the conference, and we're like, you know, I want to get more involved, want to help. So Lennis, Perez, and Lisa Keys are two bloggers that are, I don't know if Lennis is, if she'd call herself a blogger, but she was one of our MCs last year and did a session talk. So they're kind of heading up the marketing front. They're helping to interview some of the speakers ahead of time, and you know, just do a lot of work on putting the marketing plan together, because that is certainly not my background. And Jason and I have a lot of other stuff. And then Seth is another person that we met last year who really was like,
I've known Seth for a while, but
yeah,
I've known Seth was in Boy Scouts with me 30 years ago.
How did I not know this?
Yeah, my earliest memories of Seth are, I have to just share this because he would be mortified. It's when we were in Boy Scouts and him being so homesick and crying, as he was 2 years younger than us, and just going, oh, this kid is such a weenie. And now 30 years later, we're still really good friends and working together.
And which
I'm an Eagle Scout myself, so I've done my time out in the woods.
I'm so out of my league here. I was going to say, which one of you guys ended up in the military?
Seth did.
Yeah, the weenie.
Yeah, the one that was crying.
Yeah. No, he's awesome. And to be perfectly honest, I went to one session at the conference last year because I was so busy. at my own stinking conference. I got to see one talk, and Seth had noticed and was like, "Look, I really enjoyed this. He was helping Jason out in the booth, and then he kind of helped with some of the other stuff. And he's like, I actually really enjoyed this. I'd love to help out on the logistics side. So he's gotten really involved in kind of helping to run all of that. And when we were doing the in-person thing, get involved with the hotel. So both of those sort of subcommittees within our general committee, they've been just instrumental. And certainly, we just did the recipe contest. We've had a lot of our committee members volunteer to judge for that and go through. So it's a team effort for sure. I mean, it's a lot of stuff, and we're grateful for everybody that's kind of come to support it and help out.
Got to start somewhere. I mean, you could have a Star Chef size conference at some point, right?
We'll see.
Last year, it felt big last year. I mean, you had multiple rooms, multiple things going on at the same time. You had your little area out front where people could look at things and try some food. So, it already felt like a big conference for year one, in my opinion, because I've been to a lot of smaller conferences.
Yeah, we were pleased with the field. That we had about 140, 150 people there, and it was a good amount that it felt that there was a lot of people, but it didn't feel overwhelming, and especially at the receptions and with the food, everyone could really mingle and talk with everyone, and all the speakers came out to the receptions, and so you could hang out with all these big names that were there, and they were happy to have a drink and hang out and chat, which gave it a really good intimate feeling to it.
Yeah, I don't want to get to the point where our numbers are so big that it feels like a trade show. That's not what we're in this for. And so I think certainly we want to grow. We have great aspirations for where this is going to go, but our focus in all of that is, okay, how do we do it measurably? How do we make sure we don't lose? Because I've done a lot of conferences and seminars, and they're really, I'm not saying this because it was our thing. There was just something special in the community last year that I felt, and I think a lot of other people shared that they felt as well, and I don't want to lose that. So, we're doing a lot to figure out how do we promote that, how do we keep that, and how do we, grow without losing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I always find when I go to those things, I have as much fun and learn as much from the other attendees as the people presenting, right? Because you're all there for the same thing. You all have the same passion. And I'm sure you have a lot of people who made friends with each other. Actually, there's a lot of people that I became friends with who I've kept in contact with after that from last year. So that was really cool. And some of them we talk a lot on Instagram now. One of my friends that I went to culinary school with traveled from Puerto Rico to come to your conference, which was insane because I hadn't seen him since we graduated in like 98.
Yeah.
And then he was randomly there. He's like, oh yeah, I'm really into this. He's got a restaurant in Puerto Rico. And I guess his wife bought him, tickets for whatever, an anniversary or something. But that seemed crazy to me, like huge that he came up for that. And I was glad that I was able to catch up with him while he was in town.
Yeah, and then he brought a friend of his who I think was the director of culinary for like Planet Hollywood in Dominican Republic or something. Yeah, he was great, and his wife was so fun to deal with. Like, she was wonderful. She was so excited to surprise him with this, and I mean it's a big community, but it's really small at the same time. Like there's a power in building friendships with people, and I think that's why it's important to do these things outside of just, sharing recipes online and whatnot. That's I think what these bring to the table.
Yeah. Do you guys have anything else you want to talk about as far as Sous Vide, your conference, or anything before I jump into a couple like closing rapid fire questions?
I would just say we just did our first recipe contest, which was Sous Vide Comfort Foods, and we announced the winners of that yesterday, which we got about 30 entrants and gave away a couple circulators and had about, I think, 450, almost 500 people voted. So we're doing another one that we launched this morning that is Sous Vide Barbecue. Meathead's one of the judges on that. Next month is going to be Sous Vide Cocktails. So we're pretty excited about those. If anybody has recipes that they'd like to get out there and try to win one of these awards. We'd love to have submissions for that.
And I would say if you're out there and listening and you're interested in sous vide, just give it a try. You can do some really interesting things with it, and it's just one more tool, to make you a better chef and help you do what you want to do. It's not replacing anything necessarily. It's just teaching you one more thing that you can, use to manipulate food in whatever way you want to get the desired result. So give it a try, check out our stuff, send us questions, watch our live Q&As, and you can, shoot people like Dave Pietranczyk and Michael Kelly an email, and they'll be more than happy to, help get you started and give you some ideas on how you can use it in whatever type of flow your kitchen has.
We have really comprehensive show notes, so there will be links to all of your website, social media, all that stuff, so everyone will be able to reach out and connect with you guys, and I share this everywhere. So
awesome. Thanks, Chris.
So other than yourselves and your resources that you have, I just kind of like to see what other people are into. So let's start. Do you guys have favorite chefs, one or two?
Oh, that's a hard question. There are so many. I really, James Briscione has been someone I followed for a while. I have the Flavor Matrix. I love what he does. I'm a weird food guy. Like I love just experimenting with stuff. So he's certainly somebody that I've enjoyed following. Trying to think. I followed a lot since the summit last year, and I followed a lot of food before, but not a lot on the pro side, and I think I've been pretty impressed with a lot of people that joined us last year and followed out. But James is the one that I probably watched the most.
I should probably follow more chefs, but I tend to not have enough time to consume as much other food media because I'm busy writing my own recipes and doing stuff. But I do follow, the chefs that follow the ISVA and have done stuff with us, but nothing jumps out uniquely off the top of my head, which is really too bad.
No, not at all. And how about resources? Do you have like websites that you love, cookbooks, like anything to point people in the direction, again, other than yours, because you have a lot, but what are you looking at and what do you recommend people check out?
I use a lot of the Polyscience resources, especially for sous vide. They have some great videos and recipes and guides. So I really like the stuff that Dave puts together there. I follow, it's not sous vide specific, but Ideas in Food is, they've been at it for 15, 20 years every day.
I was really surprised. Like it looked like a month off not too long ago. And I was like, you guys were the ones you've blogged every single day for like 15 years. But I mean, there's obviously a lot going on right now. I was surprised that they did it as long as they did. And now it's picked up. I mean, they're a couple of my very favorite people. And when you talk about people who are like open books as far as sharing information, they have been amazing. And actually my first kind of like break in the professionalish industry, like with food media, was they gave me credit for something on their website one day. And it was like the first time I'd ever been mentioned in any food media. I mean, I'd been cooking professionally for like 20 plus years, but I felt like I finally made it when I got like a little credit on one of their blog posts. That was one of their more popular ones at the time because I helped them with some recipe development and tried some things out. And they linked to my website. And it was the first bump where I got a lot of traffic to my website.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I push everybody to Jason's website, and I don't say that because he's my partner. That's where I started, and like I said, I've bought 15 copies of his Modernist Cooking Made Easy book because I literally don't think there's a better place to get started with sous vide than that book. I mean, I really honestly don't.
I appreciate that, and if you're a chef and you're interested in really like from start to finish understanding the sous vide process and want to implement it in your kitchen, or if you manage restaurants and want to figure it out, Crea does have a 3-day sous vide cooking class. Cooking class is the wrong term. It's sous vide, just everything class. I took it last year, and takes you through a lot of the science behind it, as well as how you can use it in your restaurants and the safety considerations and how to put it as part of your cooking flow. And it's a really comprehensive and expensive, but if you are looking to implement sous vide in your restaurant long term, like that's a great thing that you can go do for 3 days and come away knowing more about sous vide than most of the other cooks out there.
They also do a 3-day HACCP course, which I think is one of the barriers that really keeps people from keeps chefs from bringing this into their restaurant. They work with health departments all over the place, so they're available for consulting. And their chief scientist is Dr. Bruno Gusso, who invented the method. So you can't learn from better people. That's
the HACCP plan is so hard because a lot of departments of health. I mean, like where I was working in Maryland, Frederick County is a little more advanced. Like we have Volt downtown, so that's maybe more common. But I was working in Carroll County, and like I don't think anyone was doing it, and we had a vac machine and all this, and they come in and they've literally never seen it, and it's like, what's the starting point? Because it's new to them, and they instantly want to say like, shut it down, don't use it, and it's a lot of legwork to get that approved, and that's why there's a lot of secretive use of these things. I mean, I'm not calling anyone out, but we all know people who have like vac machines and circulators that are kind of like hidden, and they take them out to do their thing when nobody's going to catch them. The same with like the charcuterie in the closet,
Yeah. It's, I mean, we did a food conference in Delaware trying to sous vide 300 pounds of beef, and we went through some of the same stuff, and it ended up working out. But yeah, it's just, it's new. It's not new, but it's new to them. It's something that they don't know a lot about. So, there's a lot of resources like that are helpful.
Have you guys had any notable fails, like something that you really thought you could do sous vide that at the end of the day was not worth doing, but you just wanted to try?
The biggest fails that I normally have, or because I do a lot of testing of circulators, and I'll use some of the inexpensive ones. And so I experimented accidentally by seeing what happens if you cook a tri-tip at boiling temperature for about half an hour, because the thermometer in the circulator went haywire and it just was boiling the water. It is not good, as you might imagine. That's the majority of the fails that I've had.
Let's see. I was trying to do a duck Benedict because I have a farm that does duck eggs. Duck eggs don't cook exactly the same as chicken eggs, I realized very, very quickly. So, that took me a little bit. I think my most disappointing result, honestly, and this sounds hilarious, and I'm going to say another Benedict, unfortunately, but I had this alpaca shank that I was like so excited to cook alpaca for the first time. And I'm like, oh, it's a shank. It's like lamb, 24 hours. This will work out really well. And it was like shoe leather. It was so tough that, I was so disappointed that morning that I didn't get to have my nice alpaca Benedict.
Sure, there's not a lot of resources for cooking alpaca. Where do you even get alpaca? I mean, is it like a special order through Cisco kind of thing?
No, there's a couple. There's a few places, but I got that one, I think, at Fossil Farms in New Jersey. Steaks and Game in Texas is another one. I just saw. That's another person I like watching, Justice Stewart with Gourmet Deconstructed. He does a lot of.
I was going to say Justice is great.
He does a lot of fun. Like he's done everything from Sichuan jellyfish to deep fried python nuggets and all sorts.
What was his camel short ribs he did?
Yeah, and he posts these amazing camel short ribs, and then I can't buy camel short ribs anywhere. Like the supplier that he used doesn't have them anymore. So
I've gotten camel before and cooked it, but it was just ground. Short ribs, that I wouldn't even think of camel having short ribs, but I guess.
Yeah, there's I have some camel burger patties in my freezer actually to try, but he did some antelope ribs a couple weeks ago that I instantly was like, I am so making those. Bought them from Steaks and Game, and I'm just waiting for figs to come in because I want to do a fig barbecue sauce on them.
But I just see weird things sometimes, like people talk about like making a cake sous vide, and I'm just kind of like, what are you doing? Like, just put your cake batter in a pan and throw it in the oven. Like, I don't feel like you need to try to do everything sous vide. I don't see any benefit to do that. It's like 25 minutes in the oven. What are you doing?
Yeah, there's definitely some things especially in my group, I always encourage everyone to explore the method, because that's my Facebook group is exploring sous vide. So it's all about seeing what sous vide can do. And there's a lot that you can do with it, but like most things, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to do it every single time. I think it's good to try stuff, but it's, like I like scallops sous vide sometimes, and it might change the texture a little bit and make it a little bit easier. But like I had scallops last night and I just pan fried them because they were going to be just as fast to do that because I didn't have my circulator set up. So it's, there's some things like that I think can give you convenience, and some people really like using sous vide for it. And my answer to that's great, then use it. And there's other people that don't, and my answer is great, don't use it then. But there are things like I use my sous vide machine to make oatmeal all the time. And it's like,
interesting. Why is that? Is it because you get a better texture, or is it a convenience that you can do like a bigger batch?
It's because every single time I do it on the stove, I don't pay attention and it boils over on the stove. And with the sous vide, it never boils over. I don't know if it tastes any better, but I am not cleaning up my stove every time I do it. So I use sous vide for it. And some people would say it's stupid, but like that's the reasoning behind it makes sense. And that's why I use it. So there's some things like that I think personal preference could come into play.
Makes me think about grits, because I do a lot of grits, like you'll do a shrimp and grits for like 15 people, and that's the same thing. It's like if it's in a pot and you have that much, you're going to burn. You have to stir all the time. The same with doing like a polenta. Like maybe it's a better idea to just throw it in the circulator and not worry about it, because you're not going to get that contact burning.
Yeah, grits you can remove a lot of that. You can remove a lot of that variability too, that, no matter, unless you have like a control freak or something, your stove is never the exact same temperature. The evaporation is going to happen differently depending on the humidity. And like, it's part of being a chef, right? Is knowing that and watching it and using sight and sound. But if you're doing something that you don't want to have to pay attention to, then it's going to be in like a sealed mason jar, or a sealed bag that there's no evaporation. You know exactly how much water, how much salt, how much grain that you need to put in it, and you're going to get a consistent result every time, which there's definitely value to that.
Cheesecake's another one like that I do cheesecakes all the time in the little mason jars, and they don't crack, they don't dry out, they're phenomenal. And any of those kind of custardy desserts work really, really well.
I would never think of doing a cheesecake in there.
Oh,
so you're doing mini individuals?
Yeah, I use like the 4-ounce mason jars. I mean, I've definitely toyed with the idea of doing an 8-ounce mason jar because, why not? But it's fun. Like I've mixed in, I'll make the cheesecake batter and, just a little graham cracker crust. And I've mixed in Oreos inside it or done an Oreo crust. I've mixed in chopped banana, just dropped it in with the batter. And made a little banana cream. I mean, the possibilities are endless, and it's so just light and creamy and phenomenal.
One thing that a lot of people forget is that at its most basic, sous vide is just maintaining a specific temperature over time. And there's a lot of things like cheesecake and like making a hollandaise sauce, tempering chocolate, yogurt, that you're holding something at a set temperature. And we do a lot of things with, double boilers and, putting, in a pan with water in it in the oven to kind of maintain the temperature that we were trying to like kind of trick it. And you can use sous vide to accomplish a lot of those things, because that's what it's designed for. And you might need to finish it in a different way or, do something at the end. But if you're holding something in your kitchen and you're like, every time I do this, I'm holding it at a specific temperature, that's something that is a good candidate to kind of explore with sous vide to see if it can accomplish that in a much easier, manner for you.
Yep.
Yeah, I do a lot of individual cheesecakes and a lot of creme brulees. So probably good thing to check out. I've never actually done either of those sous vide, so I'm going to put it on my list.
Brulee just won our comfort food contest. Like that was the winning recipe. And she unmolded it. I couldn't believe it. I've never seen an unmolded creme brulee before. It was pretty fantastic.
I wouldn't even dare. I don't unmold my creme brulee. I don't unmold my panna cottas. Like they're going to go in the container that they're made in, and that's how I'm serving them.
Yep, I'm with you.
Well, this has been great. Thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. I loved having you. I hope you enjoyed coming on, talking about sous vide and your conference and everything.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate you having us come on. This was great. And it's always fun chatting with you. You're so knowledgeable and, you're passionate about cooking, and I always really enjoy our conversations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love sharing culinary knowledge, and you guys do too. I mean, people always ask me like, could I get the recipe for this? And when I say I'm going to share, people are so surprised because I think they think all chefs have like secret recipes. And what's the point of that? Like, I don't see not sharing what I know with everyone. So
Yeah.
even if you're a customer, I mean, you're not going to not hire me to do a dinner for you because you now have my recipe. It's not about that. It's about the convenience of not having to do the work.
Yeah.
And
And
so
the
I always,
yeah.
I always want to share. So I'm hoping that I have a lot of non-professional people listen to this podcast and can point them in your direction.
We appreciate that.
Absolutely.
So to all our listeners, this was the Chefs Without Restaurants podcast. As always, you can find us at chefswithoutrestaurants.com and .org and on all social media platforms. Thanks, and have a great week. All right, guys. Thank you.